The Netherlands has always looked like a team that understands football better than almost everyone else. The spacing, the structure, the rhythm, for decades, Dutch football helped shape the modern game itself. And yet, the strangest part of their story is this: some of the most influential football minds in history still produced a national team that so often stopped just short of the final step. That is the shadow hanging over this generation. Not a lack of talent, not a lack of ideas, but the question that has followed the Netherlands for generations: can beautiful football survive tournament pressure? Because this team is fascinating. Virgil van Dijk still gives them authority. Frenkie de Jong still gives them control. And players like Xavi Simons and Jeremie Frimpong represent something more dangerous: unpredictability. But tournament football does not reward identity alone. It rewards balance, emotional stability, and the ability to survive chaos. And this is why the Netherlands may be one of the most difficult teams to understand before World Cup 2026. For the Netherlands, football has never just been about winning. That sounds romantic, maybe even exaggerated. But historically, Dutch football has always treated the game like a system of ideas. Space matters, positioning matters, timing matters. But international football is cruel in a different way. You do not have an entire club season to perfect mechanisms. You do not get months to stabilize chemistry. And knockout football often destroys teams that depend too heavily on rhythm. That tension defines the modern Netherlands. Because this current squad does not feel chaotic. It feels organized, deliberate, even mature at times. But there are moments when the structure suddenly stretches too far. The distances become larger, the midfield loses compactness. Transitions become dangerous, and emotionally, the game can start moving faster than the Netherlands wants it to. That is the contradiction. This is not the reckless Dutch football of old stereotypes. This team actually wants control, but here is where things get interesting. The Netherlands may now be caught between two identities at once. One side still carries the historical expectation of expressive, dominant football. The other side understands that modern tournaments are often won by teams that know when not to play beautifully. That balance matters, because World Cup football punishes emotional impatience faster than almost anything else in sport. Dutch football history is full of teams people remember emotionally. The 1974 side changed how many people saw football itself. The 1978 generation reached another final. The 2010 team came painfully close again. Close enough to become immortal, but never fully complete. That history creates pressure. The Netherlands often enters tournaments carrying the expectation that they should represent football aesthetically, not just competitively. Because tournament football is not always logical. It is emotional, violent in momentum swings. Sometimes ugly. The teams that survive are usually the ones capable of adapting emotionally when structure breaks down. Van Dijk is not just a center back in this team, he is a stabilizer. His importance is psychological as much as tactical. The Netherlands does not enter the 2026 cycle as a rebuilding team. The structure already exists, the talent pipeline still exists. Can this generation transform intelligence into tournament resilience? Virgil van Dijk still anchors the defensive structure. Nathan Ake gives flexibility across the back line. Frenkie de Jong remains the central connector in possession. Xavi Simons may become one of the defining faces of this era. Xavi Simons is not just an attacking midfielder. In this team, he is a chaos creator. His movement breaks structure intentionally. He drifts between lines. He accelerates combinations. Frenkie de Jong is not just a midfielder. He is the pressure release mechanism of the entire system. Modern Dutch football still begins with structure. The build-up phase matters enormously. Virgil van Dijk is not only important because of defending. He changes the first phase of possession. Nathan Ake adds another layer. Ake is not just a defender. He is a structural connector. Frenkie de Jong often operates like a moving escape route for pressure. Can possession-heavy control still survive elite knockout football? Frimpong is not just a wingback. In this team, he is width explosion. His speed changes the geometry of attacks immediately. The attacking potential is obvious. The structural stability is less certain. Actually, this may be the most tactically adaptable Netherlands side in years. What is your identity when pressure becomes unbearable? Virgil van Dijk remains the emotional reference point. Xavi Simons brings unpredictability. Jeremie Frimpong brings acceleration. Cody Gakpo brings directness. He is not just a forward. In this team, he is an inside channel threat. Reijnders is not just a midfielder. He is a progression carrier. There is more improvisation, more vertical movement, more willingness to attack transition moments quickly. The biggest concern surrounding the Netherlands is not talent. It is balance under stress. Against elite tournament opposition, one unstable moment can define an entire match. The best footballing team does not always win. The most emotionally adaptable team usually survives longest. By the time World Cup 2026 arrives, the Netherlands may enter the tournament as one of football's most dangerous unanswered questions. Not necessarily the favorite, but possibly one of the most uncomfortable opponents for any elite nation. Because tournament football is often about balance between structure and unpredictability, and the Dutch squad may finally possess both. There is enough experience to stabilize pressure moments. There is enough athleticism to survive modern transitions. And there is enough technical intelligence to control phases of matches against almost anyone. That combination matters, especially in modern tournaments where games constantly shift between tactical organization and emotional chaos. The Netherlands now looks more adaptable than many previous generations. That could become their biggest strength. They are no longer trapped inside one rigid football ideology. They can press high, they can defend deeper, they can circulate possession patiently, or attack vertically through transition lanes. That tactical flexibility gives them multiple ways to survive different tournament scenarios. And survival is the key word, because World Cups are not won through perfection. They are won through adaptation. Still, uncertainty remains. The Netherlands does not yet feel emotionally inevitable in the way truly dominant tournament teams sometimes do. France often looks physically inevitable. Argentina recently looked emotionally inevitable. Spain in earlier eras looked positionally inevitable. The Dutch still feel fragile enough to be vulnerable. And maybe that vulnerability is part of their identity now. This generation does not carry the arrogance that sometimes surrounded older Dutch sides, but it still carries the weight of history. Every tournament reopens old memories, generations that came close enough to shape football history without fully conquering it. That emotional inheritance never completely disappears. And this is why World Cup 2026 could become such a defining moment. Because this tournament may determine whether the Netherlands becomes remembered as another intelligent but incomplete generation, or the group that finally learned how to survive modern tournament football emotionally as well as tactically. That is the real challenge, not simply playing well, but surviving pressure when matches stop following logic. And perhaps the most important thing about this Dutch side is this. They no longer seem obsessed with proving they are the purest footballing nation in the world. They seem more interested in becoming effective, more mature, more flexible, more willing to suffer when necessary. That sounds small. It is not small at all. Tournament football often belongs to teams capable of accepting imperfection. And maybe, finally, the Netherlands is beginning to understand that. The story of Dutch football has never really been about a lack of ideas. If anything, the opposite is true. Few nations have influenced football thinking more deeply than the Netherlands. But influence and trophies are not always the same thing. That tension still defines this team. because the Netherlands continues to produce intelligent players, technically refined players, players capable of controlling matches through positioning and rhythm. But modern football keeps asking harder questions. Can you survive chaos? Can you adapt emotionally? Can you remain stable when structure breaks apart? That is the challenge waiting for this generation. Virgil van Dijk represents stability. Frenkie de Jong represents control. Xavi Simons represents unpredictability. And players like Gakpo and Frimpong represent the vertical aggression modern tournaments demand. Individually, the pieces are impressive. Collectively, the picture is still unfinished. And maybe that uncertainty is exactly what makes the Netherlands so fascinating before 2026. Because they could lose earlier than expected. That possibility is real. But they could also become one of the most balanced Dutch teams in decades if the emotional side of tournament football finally matches the tactical side. That is the real question, not whether the Netherlands understands football. They always have. The question is whether this generation can finally master the part of football that cannot be fully controlled. Pressure, chaos, and the emotional violence of the World Cup itself.